I watched my 7-year-old daughter sit at the Thanksgiving table holding a flimsy paper plate while everyone around her ate from my mother-in-law's precious heirloom china. The same china she had bragged about for 30 years. The same china that supposedly survived the Great Depression and 2 world wars. The same china that was apparently too sacred for my little girl to touch. "She's too clumsy for the good stuff," Vivienne announced loud enough for the entire table to hear. She said it casually, like she was commenting on the weather, like she hadn't just publicly branded my daughter as defective in front of our whole family. I looked at my husband Corbin, waiting for him to say something, waiting for him to defend our child. He shifted in his chair and stared at his turkey. He said nothing. 12 years of marriage, and I had never felt more alone than I did in that moment. My little girl's face crumbled. Her bottom lip trembled. She looked down at her paper plate, then at her cousins sitting across from her with their beautiful antique china, and I watched the light in her eyes dim. She didn't cry. That was almost worse. She had already learned at 7 years old that crying in front of Vivienne Winslow only made things worse. She leaned over to me and whispered 4 words that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. "Am I bad, Mommy?" I will never forget how small her voice sounded. I will never forget the shame on her face. My daughter, my beautiful Wren, who drew pictures of butterflies and sang songs to our dog and still believed in magic, genuinely thought she had done something wrong. She thought she deserved to be singled out. She thought being different meant being less than everyone else at that table. And in that moment, something inside me finally snapped. But I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I did not grab my daughter and storm out of that house, though every cell in my body was begging me to do exactly that. Instead, I did something Vivienne never expected. I pulled out my phone and pressed record. "What are you doing?" she asked sharply, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. "Making a memory," I replied. My voice was steady. My hands were not shaking. I had never felt more calm or more certain of anything in my entire life. This is a family gathering, isn't it? I want to remember every single detail. Vivienne's eyes narrowed, but she recovered quickly. She was too arrogant to think that video would ever matter. She was too confident in her position, too secure in the empire she had built on old money and social connections and the silent compliance of everyone around her. She thought I was just the poor girl her son had foolishly married. She thought I would never fight back. She was wrong. For 10 years, I had swallowed every insult, every backhanded compliment, every passive-aggressive comment about my clothes, my job, my family, my worth as a wife and mother. I had watched Vivienne treat my daughter like an afterthought while showering her other grandchildren with gifts and attention and praise. I had listened to my husband make excuses for his mother's cruelty, telling me I was too sensitive, telling me I was reading too much into things, telling me to just let it go for the sake of family peace. There was no more peace to keep. There was only my daughter sitting at a table full of people who were supposed to love her, holding a paper plate, believing she was bad. I kept recording. I captured Vivienne carving the turkey with a satisfied smile on her face. I captured my sister-in-law Opal smirking at me from across the table, delighted by my humiliation. I captured my father-in-law Howard staring at his plate, too cowardly to say a word. I captured my husband reaching for the gravy like nothing was happening, like his daughter was not sitting 3 feet away from him with a broken heart. I captured all of it. Every uncomfortable silence, every knowing glance, every second of the meal where my child was treated like she did not belong. When dinner was over, I helped Wren put on her coat. I thanked Vivienne for hosting. I smiled politely and said all the right things, because that is what Delia Winslow had always done. That is what was expected of me. But underneath my calm exterior, I was already planning. I was already thinking about what I was going to do with that video. I was already imagining the look on Vivienne's face when she realized that her perfect family image was about to come crashing down around her. My name is Delia Winslow. I am a pediatric nurse. I am a mother. And for 10 years, I was the woman who kept quiet to keep the peace. That Thanksgiving was the last time I ever stayed silent. What I did with that video made the Winslow family lose everything: their money, their reputation, their precious social standing, the estate that had been in their family for 3 generations, the country club membership Vivienne valued more than her own grandchild. All of it. Gone. And I do not regret a single thing. This is the story of how I stopped being a victim and started fighting back. This is the story of how one paper plate at one Thanksgiving dinner destroyed a family legacy that had stood for 60 years. This is the story of what happens when you push a mother too far. Because there is nothing more dangerous than a woman who has finally had enough. To understand why that Thanksgiving broke me, you need to understand who I was before I became a Winslow. I grew up in a small town in Ohio with a single mother who worked double shifts at a textile factory to keep food on our table. We did not have much, but we had each other, and my mother taught me that kindness and hard work mattered more than money or status. I believed her. I still do. I put myself through nursing school by working 3 jobs. I waited tables at a diner. I cleaned offices at night. I worked weekends at a hospital cafeteria, serving food to visitors and staff. That is where I met Corbin Winslow. He was 24 years old and visiting his grandmother in the cardiac unit. I was 22, exhausted and wearing a hairnet that made me look ridiculous. He asked me for a cup of coffee, and when I handed it to him, he smiled at me like I was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Nobody had ever looked at me that way before. We talked for an hour that day. He came back the next day and the day after that, even after his grandmother was discharged. He said he could not stop thinking about me. He said I was different from anyone he had ever met. He said he did not care where I came from or how much money I had. I believed him. That was my first mistake. The first time I met Vivienne Winslow, I knew I would never be accepted. Corbin brought me to Sunday dinner at the family estate, a massive house with white columns and a circular driveway that looked like something out of a magazine. I wore the nicest dress I owned and the only pair of heels I had. Vivienne opened the door, looked me up and down, and her eyes landed on my shoes. They were scuffed. I had bought them secondhand 3 years earlier. "Interesting choice," she said. "Not hello, not nice to meet you." Just those 2 words delivered with a thin smile that did not reach her eyes. That was the beginning. Over the next 12 years, Vivienne made it her mission to remind me that I did not belong. She wore white to our wedding. She threw elaborate baby showers for Opal's children, but refused to host one for Wren, claiming she was too busy. Every Christmas, Opal's kids received mountains of expensive gifts, while Wren got a coloring book and a pack of crayons that Vivienne had clearly purchased at the dollar store. Each insult was small enough to be dismissed. Each slight was subtle enough that when I complained, Corbin would shake his head and tell me I was overreacting. "Mom doesn't mean it like that," he would say. "You're being too sensitive. She's just old-fashioned. Just let it go." I let it go for years. I let it go because I loved my husband. I let it go because I wanted Wren to have a relationship with her grandparents. I let it go because I thought keeping the peace was the right thing to do. But the peace I was keeping was a lie. There was no peace. There was only my silence, and Vivienne took that silence as permission to treat me and my daughter however she wanted. Wren was born 7 years ago, and she was the greatest gift of my life. She came into this world with bright eyes and a laugh that could fill an entire room. She loved animals and drawing and making up stories about magical kingdoms where everyone was kind to each other. When she was 5, her kindergarten teacher noticed that Wren struggled with certain tasks. Holding a pencil was difficult for her. Cutting with scissors was a challenge. She dropped things more often than other children. We took her to specialists, and she was diagnosed with developmental coordination disorder. It affects her fine motor skills and balance. It makes her clumsy sometimes. But clumsy does not mean careless. Clumsy does not mean stupid. Clumsy does not mean she deserves to be treated like she is broken. Wren worked so hard in occupational therapy. She practiced holding her pencil for hours. She never complained. She never gave up. And despite everything, she still adored her grandmother. She made cards for Vivienne. She drew pictures for her. She called her Grammy with so much love in her voice that it made my chest ache. Vivienne never appreciated any of it. She accepted Wren's gifts with barely concealed disinterest and set them aside without a second glance. She praised Opal's children constantly while ignoring Wren entirely. She made my daughter feel invisible. Going into that Thanksgiving, I was exhausted. I was worn down from years of fighting battles my husband refused to acknowledge. I was tired of defending myself and my daughter to people who would never see us as equals. But I went anyway. Corbin begged me to come. Wren wanted to see her cousins. And some foolish part of me still hoped that this year would be different. I was wrong. We arrived at the Winslow estate at exactly 2 o'clock, just like Vivian had instructed. The house looked beautiful, decorated with autumn wreaths and golden ribbons. From the outside, it looked like the perfect setting for a perfect family gathering. But I had learned long ago that the Winslow family was only perfect on the surface. Wren was so excited on the drive over. She had spent 3 days making a drawing for her grandmother. It was a picture of a turkey surrounded by hearts, and she had written, "Happy Thanksgiving, Grammy," in her best handwriting. The letters were crooked and some of the colors went outside the lines, but she had worked so hard on it. She held it carefully in her lap the entire drive, terrified of wrinkling it. "Do you think Grammy will like it?" she asked me. "I think she will love it," I said. I hated myself for lying, but I could not bear to dim the hope in her eyes. Opal and her family had arrived before us. When we walked through the front door, Vivian was already in the foyer, hugging Opal's children like they were the most precious creatures on earth. She kissed their cheeks and told them how much she had missed them and how big they had gotten. Then she saw us. Her smile faded just slightly, just enough for me to notice. "Oh, you made it," she said flatly. Her eyes moved to Wren and her expression tightened. "Wren, try not to touch anything valuable today. We have a lot of breakable items on display." Wren's face fell for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. She stepped forward and held out her drawing. "I made this for you, Grammy. It's a turkey with hearts because I love you." Vivian took the drawing without looking at it. She did not crouch down to Wren's level. She did not smile. She simply held it between 2 fingers like it was something mildly unpleasant. "How nice," she said. "Go wash your hands. Dinner is almost ready." She set the drawing on a side table and walked away. Wren stood there watching her grandmother leave, and I saw the confusion on her face. She did not understand why Grammy did not like her gift. She did not understand what she had done wrong. I took her hand and led her to the bathroom. I helped her wash her hands and told her the drawing was beautiful. I told her Grammy was just busy with dinner, more lies to protect her from a truth she was too young to understand. The next hour was torture. Opal's children ran through the house freely, touching everything they wanted, and nobody said a word to them. Wren sat quietly on the couch, afraid to move, afraid to break the rules her grandmother had set specifically for her. I watched Howard, my father-in-law, slip Wren a small smile from across the room. He had always liked her, I think, but he never defended her. He never said a word against his wife. His silence made him just as guilty as the rest of them. When dinner was announced, we all moved to the dining room. The table was stunning. Vivian had outdone herself with the decorations, the centerpieces, the candles. And there, at each place setting, was her grandmother's china. The plates she had talked about for as long as I had known her. The plates that were her most prized possession. Everyone took their seats. Corbin sat beside me. Wren sat on my other side. Opal's children, 6-year-old twins, sat across from us with their beautiful china plates in front of them. Howard sat at one end of the table. Vivian stood at the other, surveying her kingdom with satisfaction. Then she approached Wren with something in her hand, a paper plate, a flimsy, cheap, white paper plate. She set it down in front of my daughter like it was nothing, like it was perfectly normal, like Wren would not notice that she was the only person at the table without real dinnerware. "What is that?" I asked. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Vivian raised an eyebrow. "It's a plate, Delia. Wren can use this one. She's too clumsy for the good stuff. We all know how she is. I won't have my grandmother's china destroyed because she can't control her hands." The table went silent. I looked at Corbin, waiting for him to say something. Anything. He was her father. This was his daughter being humiliated in front of everyone. He stared at his napkin. He said nothing. Opal let out a small laugh. "Mom's just being practical. Don't make it weird, Delia." Wren looked down at her paper plate. Then she looked at her cousins with their matching china. Her lower lip trembled. She turned to me with tears pooling in her eyes and whispered the words that broke me. "Am I bad, Mommy?" I could not breathe. My vision narrowed. Every insult I had ever swallowed, every slight I had ever ignored, every time I had stayed, silent to keep the peace, came rushing back at once. My 7-year-old daughter had just asked me if she was bad because her own grandmother had publicly declared her unworthy of eating from the same plates as everyone else. Vivian began carving the turkey like nothing had happened. That was when I made my decision. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the camera and pressed record. Vivian noticed immediately. "What are you doing?" I kept my voice calm. "Making a memory. This is a family gathering. I want to remember every detail." She huffed and returned to her turkey, confident that nothing I did could ever touch her. She had no idea what was coming. I made it through the rest of that dinner by sheer willpower alone. I smiled when I was supposed to smile. I passed dishes when asked. I helped Ren cut her turkey into small pieces on that humiliating paper plate, and I pretended that everything was fine, but inside, I was burning. When dinner finally ended, I helped Ren put on her coat and thanked Vivian for hosting. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I said them anyway because I needed to get out of that house without causing a scene. I needed time to think. I needed to plan. The drive home was silent until Corbin finally spoke. "You're upset," he said. Not a question, a statement, like he was observing the weather. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Our daughter was humiliated in front of the entire family. She asked me if she was bad. "Yes, Corbin, I am upset." He sighed. That familiar, exhausted sigh he always made when I brought up his mother's behavior. "Mom didn't mean it that way. You know how she is about that, China. She's protective of it. It's been in the family for generations." I pulled the car over to the side of the road. I could not drive and have this conversation at the same time. I turned to face him. "The China is more important than your daughter's feelings? Is that what you're telling me right now?" He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. He had no answer. He never had answers. He only had excuses. "She's your mother, Corbin. I understand that. But Ren is your daughter, your child. And you sat there and said nothing while your mother told everyone at that table that our little girl was too broken to deserve the same treatment as her cousins. You're blowing this out of proportion," he said quietly. I stared at him for a long moment. The man I had loved for 12 years. The man I had built a life with. The man who had promised to stand by me through everything. I did not recognize him anymore. I pulled back onto the road and drove the rest of the way home in silence. Ren had fallen asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the emotional weight of the day. I carried her inside, changed her into her pajamas, and tucked her into bed. I kissed her forehead and told her I loved her more than anything in the world. Then I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and watched the video. I watched it 17 times. I listened to Vivian's cold voice declaring my daughter too clumsy for the good stuff. I watched Ren's face crumble. I watched my husband sit there like a coward while his mother destroyed his child's self-worth. By the 18th viewing, I had made my decision. I was done protecting the Winslow family. I was done staying silent. I was done sacrificing my daughter's well-being on the altar of family peace. Over the following weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. I saved text messages where Vivian criticized me to Opal, calling me trashy and desperate and a gold digger who had trapped her son. I found emails where she instructed Corbin to keep me out of financial decisions because I could not be trusted with money. I discovered something else that changed everything. While organizing our financial documents, I found records of payments Corbin had been making to his parents. Large payments, tens of thousands of dollars over the past 5 years. When I confronted him, he admitted that Vivian and Howard had been pressuring him to help fund Howard's friend's business venture, a venture that had failed spectacularly. They had been draining our savings for years, and Corbin had hidden it from me. I consulted a family attorney the next week. I filed for divorce, citing emotional abuse and financial deception. I requested full custody of Ren, presenting evidence of Corbin's failure to protect her from his mother's cruelty. But I was not finished. I knew that embarrassing Vivian in a divorce proceeding would not be enough. She would spin the narrative. She would paint me as the bitter ex-wife. She would continue living her comfortable life while I struggled to rebuild mine. I needed to hit her where it actually hurt. I remembered something Corbin had mentioned years ago. Vivian had an older sister named Lorraine who lived in Portland. They had been estranged for decades after a bitter fight over their mother's estate. Most importantly, Lorraine controlled the family trust, the trust that paid for the Winslow estate, the trust that funded Vivian's entire lifestyle. I found Lorraine's address through public records. I wrote her a letter explaining everything. I described 10 years of mistreatment. I detailed how Vivian had treated my daughter. I included screenshots of text messages and copies of emails, and I included the video. I mailed that package on a Tuesday morning. Then I waited. 3 weeks later, my phone rang. The area code was Portland. "Mrs. Winslow, this is Lorraine Ashford. I watched your video. I think we need to talk." Lorraine Ashford had a voice like honey poured over steel, warm but commanding, the kind of voice that made you sit up straighter without realizing you were doing it. "I watched your video 17 times, she said. "I could not stop watching it. That little girl sitting there with a paper plate while everyone else has the china my grandmother treasured. Do you know why I stopped speaking to Vivian 30 years ago?" I held my breath. No. Because she did the exact same thing to my daughter. Lorraine explained everything. 30 years ago, her daughter had been born with a mild hearing impairment. Vivian had treated the child like she was defective. She excluded her from family photos. She gave her cheaper gifts than the other grandchildren. She made comments about how unfortunate it was that Lorraine's daughter was not normal like everyone else. When Lorraine confronted her, Vivian denied everything and turned the family against her. Their mother sided with Vivian because Vivian had always been the favorite. Lorraine was pushed out, erased from family gatherings, treated like she had never existed. But their mother had done one thing right before she died. She had given Lorraine control of the family trust. "I have waited 30 years for proof that Vivian never changed," Lorraine said. "You just handed it to me on a silver platter, or should I say, a paper plate." Over the next 6 weeks, Lorraine dismantled Vivian's world with surgical precision. The first strike was financial. Lorraine restructured the family trust and removed Vivian and Howard as beneficiaries. The quarterly payments that had funded their lifestyle for decades stopped immediately. The estate, which they had always acted like they owned, actually belonged to the trust. Lorraine informed them they had 60 days to vacate the property. Vivian called me screaming the day she received the notice. "You did this," she hissed into the phone. "You ungrateful, scheming little nobody. I knew you were trash the moment my son brought you home. I knew you would destroy this family." I let her finish. I let her spew every insult she had been holding back for 12 years. And when she finally ran out of venom, I responded, "I did not destroy your family, Vivian. I just let people see who you really are. You did the rest yourself." She hung up on me. It was the last time we ever spoke. The second strike came from an unexpected direction. Lorraine had connections at the country club where Vivian served on the social board. She shared the Thanksgiving video with the club president, a woman named Marjorie Thorne whose grandson had autism. Marjorie was horrified. She called an emergency board meeting and presented the video as evidence of conduct unbecoming a member. Vivian was removed from the board immediately. Her membership was revoked the following week. The club that had been the center of her social universe for 40 years closed its doors to her permanently. I heard later that Vivian tried to spin the story. She told anyone who would listen that I had manipulated the video, that I had taken things out of context, that she was the real victim. But the video spoke for itself. There was no context that made giving a 7-year-old a paper plate while everyone else ate from china acceptable. There was no explanation that made her words sound like anything other than cruelty. The third strike was Lorraine's masterstroke. She made a substantial donation to the children's hospital where I worked. The donation established a permanent fund for children with developmental differences, providing therapy and resources for families who could not afford them. She made the donation in Wren's name. The Wren Winslow Fund now helps dozens of children every year. My daughter's name is on a plaque in the hospital lobby. She is not a source of shame. She is a source of hope for other children just like her. The divorce was finalized 2 months after Thanksgiving. I received full custody of Ren. The judge reviewed the evidence of Corbin's failure to protect our daughter and his pattern of enabling his mother's abuse. He was granted supervised visitation only. Corbin came to me one last time before the final hearing. He stood on my doorstep with red eyes and trembling hands. "I didn't know it was that bad," he said. "I swear I didn't know. I'll change. I'll stand up to her. Just give me another chance." I pulled out my phone and showed him a text message exchange between him and Vivian from 2 years earlier. In it, she called Ren a burden and a disappointment. His response was a simple thumbs-up emoji. "You knew, Corbin. You always knew. You just decided that keeping your mother happy was more important than protecting your daughter. I will never forgive you for that." I closed the door in his face. Vivian and Howard were forced to sell their possessions to afford rent on a small apartment across town. The antique furniture, the artwork, the jewelry, all of it went to auction. Opal, whose lifestyle had also been funded by the trust, suddenly had to find employment for the first time in her adult life. The Winslow empire, built on old money and silence and cruelty, collapsed in less than 3 months, and I watched it burn with no regret whatsoever. 6 months after that Thanksgiving, my life looked completely different. Ren and I moved into a small house on the other side of town. It has a little garden in the backyard where we planted tomatoes and sunflowers. It has a kitchen with yellow walls because yellow is Ren's favorite color. It has a front porch with 2 rocking chairs where we sit together on warm evenings and talk about her day. It is not a mansion. It is not impressive, but it is ours, and it is filled with love instead of judgment. Ren started working with a new occupational therapist who specializes in children with developmental coordination disorder. She has made incredible progress. She can write her name clearly now. She can cut paper with scissors without getting frustrated. She still drops things sometimes, but she no longer apologizes for existing when it happens. Last month, she came home from school, holding a certificate. Her teacher had given her an award for being the kindest student in her class. She held it up to me with the biggest smile on her face. "Mommy, my teacher says being kind is more important than being perfect. Isn't that cool?" I pulled her into my arms and cried. I cried because she was right. I cried because she understood something at 7 years old that Vivian Winslow never learned in 62 years. I cried because my daughter was going to be okay. She was going to be more than okay. She was going to be extraordinary. I think about the woman I used to be, the woman who stayed silent at dinner tables while her mother-in-law made cruel comments, the woman who swallowed her anger to keep the peace, the woman who let her husband convince her that she was overreacting, that she was too sensitive, that she should just let things go. That woman is gone. I learned something important through all of this. Silence does not keep the peace. Silence gives permission. Every time I stayed quiet, I was telling Vivian that her behavior was acceptable. Every time I let an insult slide, I was teaching my daughter that she did not deserve to be defended. I will never make that mistake again. If someone is treating your child like they are less than, you have to act. I do not care if it is your mother-in-law. I do not care if it is your own parents. I do not care if it is your spouse or your sibling or your oldest friend. When an adult deliberately makes a child feel broken or unwanted or unworthy, you have a responsibility to stop it, even if it costs you relationships, even if it costs you money, even if it costs you everything. Your child is watching. Your child is learning. Your child is deciding right now whether they matter, whether they are valuable, whether they deserve to be treated with dignity. What you do in those moments will shape who they become. I chose to fight. I chose to stop being a victim. I chose to burn down a family legacy built on cruelty and silence because my daughter's sense of self-worth was more important than their comfort. I would make the same choice 1,000 times. Last week, something unexpected happened. Lorraine invited Ren and me to visit her in Portland. We drove up on a Saturday morning, and Lorraine met us at the door of her beautiful home with open arms. She hugged Ren for a long time. She told her she was brave and wonderful and perfect exactly as she was. Then she handed Ren a small box wrapped in silver paper. "I have something for you," Lorraine said. "Something that belongs to you." Ren opened the box carefully. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a single plate. It was delicate and beautiful, painted with tiny blue flowers around the edges. It was from their great-grandmother's china set. the same china Vivian had declared Ren too clumsy to touch. "This belongs to you," Lorraine told her. "It always did. You were always worthy of it." Ren held that plate like it was the most precious thing in the world. She carried it carefully to the car. She held it on her lap the entire drive home. She did not drop it. My daughter is not clumsy. She is not less than. She is not a problem to be managed. She is a 7-year-old girl who deserved to eat Thanksgiving dinner on the same plates as everyone else. She is a child who deserved to be loved unconditionally by her family. She is a human being who deserved dignity and respect. She has all of that now. She has a mother who will fight for her. She has a home filled with warmth. She has people in her life who see her for who she truly is. And she has a plate from her great-grandmother's china set sitting on a shelf in her bedroom, reminding her every single day that she was always worthy of the good stuff. That is worth everything I lost. That is worth everything I burned to the ground. That is worth every uncomfortable conversation and every legal battle and every tear I shed along the way. My name is Delia Winslow. I am a pediatric nurse. I am a mother. And I am no longer silent. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about someone in your life who needs to hear it, I want you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are allowed to fight back. Drop a comment below and tell me your story. I read every single one, and I want to know what you have overcome. And if you are not subscribed to this channel yet, click that subscribe button and join this community. We share stories like this every week, stories about ordinary people who refuse to stay silent, stories about standing up for yourself and the people you love. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and remember, you are always worthy of the good stuff.